Okay, I wanted to talk a minute about the hydrometer because it's a very important tool to use in your winemaking. Um, this thing looks more overwhelming than it really is. It's not that difficult of a concept. So I'm going to try to get a little better video on this for you. I felt like we kind of touched on it a little too fast before. So as you'll see, this scale is a decimal scale. I'm going to try to zoom in here. So I'm going to correct myself from earlier. It's actually the finishing, when you finish a wine, you will end up about 1.0 to 0.99. If you're in that range, your wine is pretty much finished and not fermenting anymore. So then this is 1.0 here. Then we go up to 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and so on up the scale. I told you to start at 1.8 or 0.8. I just left out the one part. The reason we start at 0.8 is because if I roll this over slightly this way, you will see there's a percentage scale. That tells me the potential that 1.08 has. 1.8, I'm sorry, not 08. 1.8 has the potential of about 10.5%. You see the 10 there, and the line after it is 11. That's 11%. So that 0.8 mark falls right halfway between those two, and that gives me about 10.5% down to the 1. So after my wine slows in its bubbling process, which I'll talk about later with the airlock, it'll end up being right at 1 or below. So 1.8 to 1 is 10.5%. If I put this hydrometer back in the wine solution in a week and it reads here at this point, my wine is 10.5% by volume. If it's down at the 0.99, you just add 1 more percent. It would be 11.5%. And this is typically where I take it right off the bat. I'll take it to 11.5%. Then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of trick the yeast into making more alcohol, and we're going to do it in 3-day periods. So we'll get into that later. Basically, you just can't add all the sugar at once because it can kill the yeast, and if you allow the solution to get too high in alcohol, it will kill the yeast. So you have to do it kind of slowly and kind of trick the yeast into producing the alcohol for you. Okay, so once again, we want to start at 1.08 because that's a potential of 10.5% by volume. That's from the 8 down to the 1. If you finish at the 0.99, just add 1 more percent. Again, later we will add more sugar, bringing the scale back up. We'll let it ferment a few days. It'll come back down, and whatever it comes down in points is what we add to the percent by volume. So if I added sugar and it went to 1.2, and then I waited 3 days and it was back at 1.0 again, I would have added 2 more percent on top of my 11.5% that I started with initially. So again, there's 3 scales on most hydrometers. One's for wine, one's for beer, and the percentage is kind of shared between the two. We're just going to look at the decimal scale, and then usually if you roll it one way or the other, you'll see the percentage. And those two will tell you what you're getting. Okay, thought that was important. Wanted to go over that one more time. So that you understand why you're using the hydrometer and how it's useful. Very useful tool, like I say. I can't stress that enough. You really can't know what your alcohol is without it. So, and if you ever break one or need one, they're pretty cheap. I think they're about $6-7 a piece, really, at any brew supply place. So definitely get a hydrometer because it will help you when finishing your wine in the end, knowing right where you're at and when to finish it. We like ours at about 13 to 14%. Some people like it stronger, some like it not so strong, and this is the only way you're going to figure out where your taste lies. Okay.